If you're like me and, well, live in the 21st century, you've probably at some point in your life felt anxious or stressed. In a fairly recent study done at Stanford, scientists found that performing a particular 5-minute breathing exercise was effective in reducing stress levels and improving mood. Probably the coolest thing about this cyclic sighing is that you could perform it just once and you'd reap the benefits right away. And according to neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, this cyclic sighing is the fastest physiologically verified way we're aware of to reduce your levels of stress and to reintroduce calm. If you're someone who only has 5 minutes, then check out the description below where I'll leave everything timestamped, and you could go ahead and click ahead to where I teach how to do this physiological sigh or cyclic sigh. However, I encourage you to stick around because before we got into the how of how to do this exercise, I thought it'd be fun to go over the anatomy and physiology of breathing. Luckily, the anatomy that we're dealing with here is fairly simple and it can be broken down into 2 phases. Inspiration is when we inhale and expiration is when we exhale. I'm feeling a little inspired right now, so let's start with inhalation. When we inhale, you can do so through either the nose or through the mouth. And you may have heard before that nasal breathing is better, but why? Well, as it turns out, inhaling through the nose offers more resistance to the air, which ultimately allows us to pull in more air into the lungs. This increased resistance is due in part to little bones in our nose called the nasal concha, which are found here. These concha are surrounded by nasal mucosa, which help moisten and humidify the air as we intake it, and it travels all the way ultimately to the lungs. It's difficult to see here, but the lungs are not just big floppy balloons. In fact, so within the lungs are little tiny air sacs called alveoli. These alveoli are kind of like tiny balloons. The word alveoli refers to a group of these balloons, and the singular form of the word is alveolus. And it's at the alveolus that the oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange occurs for red blood cells. The purpose of the alveoli is to increase the surface area of the lungs. In other words, more balloons open equals larger surface area, which means more oxygen delivered to your red blood cells, which makes them happy. You see, as we inhale, the goal of inhaling is to increase the space here, called the thoracic cavity, or as I like to call it, the Jurassic cavity. As it turns out, there are muscles that are literally responsible for increasing the size of this thoracic cavity. Before we get into the muscles though, let's take a breather and put to test everything that you've learned so far. I want you to inhale until it feels like your lungs are as full as they can be and try to note how that feels. First, let's inhale through the mouth, then through the nose. Okay, so a few things to note. When breathing through the nose, it may have 1, felt like it took longer to reach that full sensation in the lungs. And 2, your lungs may have felt as if they were filled with more air. If you didn't notice a difference, no worries. A lot of people are mouth breathers, like myself. And becoming a nasal breather takes a lot of practice and time. So I encourage you, for the rest of this video, try to breathe through your nose. Now, back to the muscles of inspiration. There are 5 muscles of inspiration: the external intercostals, the diaphragm, the sternocleidomastoid, the scalene muscles, of which there are 3, so I guess there's 8, and the pectoralis minor. It's the external intercostals and the diaphragm muscle that perform a lot of the grunt work when we breathe. So we'll call them the primary muscles of inspiration. The word intercostal literally means between rib. I mean, check it out. They are literally located in between the ribs. If we look at the 3D model, I mean, the name is on point. The intercostal muscles work to move the ribs superiorly to increase the size or the space within the rib cage. Now, arguably the most important muscle for breathing is the diaphragm muscle. And as you can see here in 3D, it's, let's get a better view, one sec. That's better. As you can see here, it's located below the lungs and above the liver. Now, you may have heard before that diaphragmatic breathing is the most efficient form of breathing, but why? Drum roll, please. I present to you the diaphragm diagram. As you can see, it's state of the art. Let me show you how it works. Typically, when we think of breathing, we might think that we blow up our lungs like this. But that's not the case. You see, when we activate the diaphragm, it pulls down like this, and it creates a negative pressure within the lungs, which pulls air in. It also pushes all the contents below at the abdomen, which is why your belly sticks out when you engage in diaphragmatic breathing. So, to recap, to maximally inflate the lungs, we must 1. Inhale through the nose, and 2, engage the diaphragm as we do so. So let's take another quick breather and try this out. So let's inhale through the nose. Don't forget to engage that diaphragm. Keep going, hold it. Okay, 3, 2, 1, exhale. Exhalation is usually passive, meaning it requires little to no effort at all. Exhalation can require effort though in the case of a forced expiration, like when meditating or exercising. For all the anatomy nerds out there, the muscles of expiration that are activated during a forced expiration are the external abdominal oblique muscle, the internal abdominal oblique muscle, the rectus abdominis, the transverse abdominis, the internal intercostal muscles. Lastly, there's also the quadratus lumborum, which is also a deep back muscle. Pretty cool. Now that you're all experts on the anatomy and physiology of breathing, let's put to practice all that you learned and perform the physiological sigh. This exercise can be done at any time of the day under any circumstances. Like if you're about to go up on stage to give a big speech, or, life just gives you a big ol' smack of stress, which happens. For best results, one should perform this exercise with inhaling through the nose and engaging the diaphragm. Again, making sure that belly sticks out. And make sure when you exhale, you empty the lungs as completely as you can. Now for the protocol itself, I'll go ahead and reference the study done by Andrew Huberman, which is as follows. To perform the physiological sigh, perform 2 inhales followed by a long exhale. First, inhale through your nose very deeply. After inhaling as deeply as you can, try to sneak in a little bit more air with a sharp and second inhale through your nose. Once you're nice and full, perform a long exhale until your lungs are completely empty. Now, let's try this. That was pretty good. You're an expert breather. It's like you've been doing it your whole life. Now, you could just stop there because according to the study, performing just 1 to 3 of these physiological sighs can bring you from a state of very stressed and anxious to calm and tranquil. However, in order to reap the full benefits that the study outlines, it's recommended that you perform that physiological sigh for a 5-minute cycle. And you do it once a day. So once a day, 5-minute cycle. Now, I know what you're thinking. How in the world does changing the way we breathe impact the way we feel? I'll reference a cool paper in the description that talks about the nitty-gritty science of what actually goes on. But for now, I'll just summarize the study by saying, when we consciously control our breathing, we're able to change the way our brain functions. To put this into context of what you just learned, when you feel anxious, it feels like everything's out of your control. And by controlling the way you breathe, it helps your brain feel like it's in control of the situation. Thank you, Andrew Huberman, for the inspiration for me to make this video. If you'd like to see more videos like this, go ahead and hit that like button, or, smash it if that's what you're into. If you couldn't tell, I had a lot of fun making this video, and if you guys had fun too, consider subscribing, because I want to keep doing this, but I don't know if anyone is actually watching these videos. Oh yeah. See you guys next week.
Today and not tomorrow.